"If death awaits me, let your kiss come first," she whispered to the rancher brave. The sun had just begun its slow climb over the hills, spreading soft golden light over the ranch. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of hay, earth, and the horses that grazed lazily in the distance. The ranch was a quiet, isolated place, far from the clamor of towns or cities, and it had been this way for as long as anyone could remember. Its wooden fences were weathered, the barns slightly leaning but sturdy, and the land stretched endlessly, dotted with wildflowers and tall grasses that swayed gently in the wind. For the rancher who lived there, this solitude was both a comfort and a shield. He moved through his morning routine with practiced precision. He fed the animals first, checking each stall and ensuring the horses and cows were well fed. His hands were strong, scarred from years of labor, yet careful in their touch as they handled the delicate creatures that relied on him. There was something quietly noble about him, something that demanded respect without requiring it. Yet beneath the surface, he carried a loneliness he did not speak of. The ranch was not just his home, it was a fortress against the world, a way to keep pain at bay. Friends and family had been lost, circumstances had hardened him, and he had learned to guard his heart with a kind of disciplined solitude. One morning, as he inspected the fences along the eastern pasture, he noticed something unusual. A figure appeared on the horizon, moving slowly toward the ranch. At first, he thought it might be a traveler seeking water or shelter for the night, but as the figure came closer, he saw it was a woman. She seemed fragile, her clothes worn and dusty, and she moved with a careful hesitancy, as though the world around her had grown unfamiliar and threatening. Something in her posture spoke of exhaustion and fear, a story written in the slant of her shoulders and the downward tilt of her head. The rancher's first instinct was caution. Life in the countryside could be unforgiving, and strangers could bring unexpected danger. Yet there was also a part of him that could not ignore a person in distress, especially a woman who seemed small and vulnerable against the vast expanse of the ranch. He waited quietly as she approached, keeping a careful distance until she spoke, her voice a soft, almost hesitant whisper. "Please, I just need a place to rest," she said. Her eyes were wide and wary, scanning the ranch as though expecting someone or something to appear at any moment. There was no threat in her tone, only desperation and a quiet plea for help. The rancher studied her for a moment. He noticed the dirt on her boots, the frayed edges of her coat, and the faint bruises on her hands. She had been on the road for a long time, traveling with no certainty of safety. He saw in her eyes a story that had not yet been told, a pain that had been carried silently and alone. And yet there was a quiet strength there too, a spark that refused to be extinguished. "You can stay," he said simply, his voice steady, calm, but not unkind. "There's food, water, and shelter. You can rest here." The woman's lips parted slightly, surprise flickering across her face. She had expected rejection, suspicion, or even hostility. Instead, she found a kind of quiet acceptance she had not encountered in a long time. She nodded, her shoulders relaxing just a fraction, and allowed herself to follow him toward the small cabin near the edge of the ranch. The cabin was simple, with a wooden door, a small window that let in the morning light, and a hearth that promised warmth. The rancher opened it for her, and she stepped inside cautiously, taking in her surroundings with a mixture of awe and relief. "You can rest here as long as you need," he said. "I'll bring food in a little while." She nodded again, barely trusting herself to speak. Her throat was dry, her lips cracked from dust and wind, and her eyes held a sadness that seemed almost tangible. She sat on the edge of the simple bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as if holding herself together from within. The rancher turned and left the cabin, giving her a moment of privacy. Outside, he went about his chores, keeping an eye on her from a distance, observing without intruding, respecting the space she seemed to need. Days passed and the woman began to settle into the rhythm of the ranch. She helped with small chores at first, gathering eggs from the coop, sweeping the cabin, filling water buckets, but she moved carefully, never overstepping boundaries. She spoke little, her words measured and deliberate, but her presence gradually became a quiet part of the ranch's life. The rancher watched her closely, noting the careful way she treated the animals, the gentle way she carried herself, and the way her eyes softened when she was not aware of anyone watching. There was a vulnerability there, yes, but also a quiet courage that was slowly revealing itself. The rancher, too, began to let the solitude slip just a little. He found himself sharing small moments with her, showing her how to mend a fence, explaining which herbs could be used for minor injuries, or teaching her to care for the horses. At first, it was practical, a matter of survival and ranch life. But over time, their interactions took on a subtle intimacy, a connection that went beyond words. They shared silence comfortably, each presence offering a sense of security the other had not known they needed. For the first time in years, the rancher felt the walls around his heart begin to soften, brick by brick. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the woman lingered outside the cabin. She watched the light fade over the hills, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. The rancher joined her quietly, standing a few feet away, watching the same sunset. There was no need for words. The air between them was filled with understanding and a mutual respect for each other's pain and resilience. It was in these quiet moments that the depth of their connection began to grow, built on trust, shared experiences, and the unspoken acknowledgement of each other's scars. And yet, there was an undercurrent of tension. The woman had come to the ranch for safety, but her past was not easily left behind. There were moments when fear flickered in her eyes, when she flinched at sudden noises, or when her hands trembled as she handled chores. The rancher noticed these moments but never pressed. He knew the journey to trust and healing was delicate, and patience was as essential as strength. He offered her space to heal, while also remaining a silent guardian, ensuring that the ranch and its surroundings remained a sanctuary. The bond between them continued to deepen, subtle yet powerful. She began to smile more often, her laughter soft but genuine, echoing faintly across the fields. The rancher, in turn, found himself anticipating her presence, feeling a warmth he had long suppressed. Their days followed the rhythm of the ranch, early mornings, long afternoons, and quiet evenings. But beneath the ordinary routine, something extraordinary was growing. A sense of companionship, respect, and perhaps the beginnings of love started to take root, fragile yet undeniable. Then, one morning, as the mist rose from the pastures and the dew clung to the grass, the woman approached the rancher while he was repairing a section of fence. Her steps were hesitant but determined, and there was a look in her eyes that spoke of a decision made after long consideration. She handed him a bundle of freshly picked herbs, a simple gesture, yet one that carried deeper meaning. It was her way of saying thank you without words, a recognition of his quiet courage and the sanctuary he had offered her. The rancher accepted the herbs with a nod, sensing the depth behind her action, but he said nothing. Words were unnecessary. The connection between them was already beyond them. By the time the sun had fully risen, the ranch had taken on a different feel. It was no longer just a place of work and solitude. It had become a space where trust could be rebuilt, where two weary souls could find respite from the world's hardships. The rancher's routine, once mechanical and solitary, now included small gestures of kindness and attention toward her. He watched her as she worked, admired the quiet determination she displayed, and recognized the courage it took to face each day after all she had endured. In return, she observed him, the quiet strength, the patience, and the subtle kindness that defined his character. The first part of their story was not marked by dramatic events or loud declarations. Instead, It was shaped by small, meaningful moments, the shared silence during chores, the careful attention to each other's needs, and the mutual respect that allowed them to coexist peacefully. These moments laid the foundation for what would grow into a profound and life-altering connection. Both were slowly learning that even in a world filled with uncertainty, there could be trust, safety, and the quiet beginnings of love. And so, the ranch remained their sanctuary, the sun rising and setting over its open fields, a witness to the slow, delicate unfolding of two lives intertwined not by circumstance alone, but by the courage to let someone in. In the calm of the countryside, amid the scent of hay and earth, a quiet story of hope, resilience, and unspoken connection began to take root. The days at the ranch had settled into a rhythm, one that was quiet but comforting. The sun would rise over the hills, spilling warm light across the fields, and the rancher and the woman would begin their day together, though rarely speaking more than necessary. Still, even in silence, a bond was growing, slow, steady, and undeniable. They moved around the ranch in harmony, each aware of the other's presence, each silently noticing small details. The way she carefully led the horses to the pasture, the way he adjusted a fence post with steady hands, the unspoken understanding that they were no longer entirely alone. Despite the calm, an undercurrent of tension lingered, barely perceptible but always there. The woman's past was a shadow that occasionally flickered in her eyes, in the tremor of her hands, or the way she flinched at sudden noises. She had not yet told the rancher everything, though part of her longed to. Trust, she knew, had to be earned slowly, and she was careful not to reveal too much too soon. There were nights when she would sit quietly in the cabin, staring out at the darkened fields, lost in memories she could not yet share. The rancher noticed these moments, but he never pushed. He had learned long ago that patience and respect were more powerful than questions and demands. One afternoon, as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in muted shades of orange and gold, the woman accompanied the rancher to check the water troughs. Her steps were lighter than usual, and for a moment she seemed at peace, a fleeting relief from the burden she carried. She worked quietly, filling buckets and checking the troughs, her focus complete. The rancher watched her from a short distance, noticing the small smile that tugged at her lips when a horse nuzzled her hand. These little moments of happiness were rare for her, and he felt a quiet satisfaction in seeing them. Yet, even in these calm times, the rancher sensed something he could not yet name. There was a fragility in her presence, as if any sudden wind might shatter the fragile sense of security she had found here. He observed her closely, noting the way she paused mid-task, listening intently to sounds beyond the ranch, or how her eyes would dart toward the hills as though expecting someone or something to appear. It was clear that she had been through much, and he realized that the ranch offered her safety but not freedom from fear. The woman, meanwhile, struggled with her own feelings. The ranch was safe, yes, and the rancher's presence was comforting in a way she had never known before. But she could not shake the awareness that her past would eventually catch up with her. Thoughts of what she had left behind, the mistakes, the people, the dangers, haunted her even in moments of peace. She sometimes woke in the night, heart racing, as if the past itself had reached out to find her. She kept these fears to herself, afraid that speaking them aloud might shatter the fragile trust she had started to build with the rancher. Their days continued in this delicate balance. They shared small moments of connection, sitting on the porch in the late afternoon, watching the sunset, laughing softly at a horse's stubborn behavior, exchanging brief, meaningful glances when one quietly completed a task the other had struggled with. Communication between them was subtle, often wordless, yet the rancher began to understand her in ways words could never fully express. He saw strength in her cautious movements, courage in her quiet resilience, and a heart that had survived too much but still dared to hope. One particularly cold morning, a sudden gust of wind swept across the ranch, rattling the barn doors and sending a shiver through the cabin. The woman jumped at the sound, her body stiff with fear. The rancher was immediately at her side, placing a firm but gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said softly, his voice calm and steady. "You're safe here." She nodded, taking a shaky breath, but the fear did not fully leave her. It was a reminder to both of them that, while the ranch could offer protection, it could not erase the shadows of the past. Over time, small incidents began to reveal pieces of her story. One evening, she dropped a photograph while tending to the cabin chores, and the rancher caught a glimpse of a younger version of her with a family he did not recognize. She quickly hid it, her face flushing with embarrassment and fear, but the rancher did not press. He understood that these fragments of her life were delicate, and that revealing them had to come naturally when she was ready. Patience, he knew, was the only way to help her heal. The woman's presence gradually changed the rancher as well. His days were no longer solely about work and routine. They were now colored with anticipation, the quiet joy of shared moments, and a subtle awareness of something deeper growing between them. He found himself lingering near her when she worked, seeking reasons to speak to her, to offer guidance or encouragement. He noticed the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed softly, the way her hands moved with care when tending to the animals. Though he had spent years protecting his heart, he could feel it opening, cautiously but undeniably. Despite the growing bond, fear lingered in the corners of their lives. The woman's past was not idle, and there were moments when she seemed on edge, her mind elsewhere. She would occasionally rise before dawn, wandering the fields silently, as though trying to make sense of memories that refused to stay buried. The rancher watched her from the shadows, his concern growing, though he still did not intervene unless necessary. He knew that rushing her or forcing her to confront her fears could drive her away, undoing the fragile trust they had built. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled over the hills. The sky darkened, and rain began to fall in heavy sheets. The woman was caught outside while tending to the animals, and the rancher ran to her side, guiding her quickly to the barn. Soaked to the bone, she shivered violently, her teeth chattering. Without a word, the rancher removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders, his hands steady as he helped her inside. They stayed in the barn for a while, listening to the rain hammering the roof, sharing warmth without the need for conversation. It was a quiet, intimate moment that spoke volumes: trust, safety, and the simple understanding that they were there for each other, no matter what. As the days turned into weeks, the woman began to open up in small ways. She spoke of the places she had traveled, of fleeting friendships, of moments of both joy and heartbreak. She did not yet reveal the full weight of her past, but she allowed glimpses, small pieces that hinted at the struggles she had endured. The rancher listened quietly, never interrupting, offering only reassurance when her voice wavered. Through these conversations, he learned not only about her past but also about her resilience, the strength it took to keep moving forward despite fear and loss. The connection between them deepened, but there remained an unspoken understanding. The woman's past could arrive at any moment, and they both knew that peace was fragile. Yet, rather than creating fear, this awareness made their moments together more precious. Every shared meal, every laugh, every quiet glance became a small victory against the uncertainty that loomed. The ranch, once a place of mere labor and routine, had transformed into a sanctuary of trust, hope, and tentative love. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of colors, the woman lingered near the edge of the pasture, watching the sky shift from gold to deep purple. The rancher approached quietly, standing beside her. Neither spoke for a long time. Words were unnecessary. The air between them was filled with unspoken emotions: relief, gratitude, fear, and the slow, steady growth of affection. For the first time, the woman felt a glimmer of hope that she could face her fears, not alone, but with someone who cared enough to stand beside her. Yet even in this calm, subtle fears persisted. She sometimes woke in the middle of the night, heart pounding, or flinched at distant sounds. The rancher noticed, offering silent support, gentle words and presence rather than pressure. Their bond was still new, delicate, and easily shaken by memories or shadows from her past. But despite this fragility, both recognized the rare and precious nature of what was developing between them, a connection that offered solace, trust, and perhaps the beginnings of love. By the end of the second part of their story, the ranch had become more than a place of work. It was now a home in the truest sense, a place where wounds could begin to heal, where trust could grow slowly, and where two souls, each carrying their own burdens, could find comfort in one another. The woman's presence challenged the rancher's solitude, and the rancher's strength offered her a safety she had not known before. Together, they navigated each day, aware that the future remained uncertain, yet finding beauty and hope in the quiet moments they shared. And so, life continued on the ranch, filled with small victories and quiet challenges, moments of laughter and glimmers of fear. The bond between the woman and the rancher grew stronger with each passing day, an unspoken promise forming in the spaces between words and actions. Though the shadow of the past still lingered, the present offered something neither of them had dared to hope for: connection, trust, and the possibility of facing whatever came next together. The ranch had become a place of quiet routine, where the woman and the rancher moved side by side through their days. Yet beneath the calm, there was a tension neither could ignore. The woman's past, once buried beneath layers of fear and survival, had begun to press against the fragile peace they had found. Each time she flinched at a sound, hesitated before stepping outside, or avoided the rancher's gaze for a moment too long, the rancher felt a quiet worry stir in his chest. He sensed that her silence was not merely shyness, but a protective shield guarding her from memories she was not ready to share. One late afternoon, while the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the fields, the woman carried a small basket of fresh eggs toward the cabin. Her hands shook slightly, betraying the calm she tried to maintain. The rancher, noticing her unease, set down the tools he had been using and approached her quietly. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice steady, calm, but gentle. She froze for a moment, her eyes flicking away from his. She wanted to speak, to finally release the weight she had carried alone for so long, but the words caught in her throat. She had lived too long with fear and secrecy, and vulnerability did not come easily. Yet standing there in the fading light, she realized that she could no longer hide from the man who had shown her patience, kindness, and trust. She began, her voice barely above a whisper. She took a deep breath and looked directly at him, eyes glistening with unspilled tears. "There's something you need to know about me, something I should have told you before." The rancher remained silent, waiting, his calm presence encouraging her to continue without pressuring her. He understood that some truths could only be shared in their own time, and he was willing to wait. She set the basket down and stepped closer, her hands trembling slightly. "I didn't come here by chance," she said softly. "I ran away from people, from mistakes, from a life that became too dangerous to stay in. I thought I could escape it, but the truth is, it's still following me." The rancher's eyes softened and he reached out gently, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to face it alone," he said simply. "I'm here. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Her lips quivered and she pressed a hand against his, finding strength in his unwavering presence. For the first time, she allowed herself to speak without restraint, revealing fragments of the life she had fled. She spoke of the people who had hurt her, the mistakes she had made in desperation, the threats she had narrowly escaped. She spoke of nights spent in fear, of the constant anxiety that had followed her for years. Her words were fragmented, punctuated by pauses and sobs, but they carried a raw honesty that left the rancher silently listening, absorbing every detail with patience and empathy. He did not interrupt, did not offer judgment or advice. He simply stood by her, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of her confession. The weight she had carried alone for so long now felt lighter, if only slightly, because someone had finally acknowledged it without turning away. When her voice faltered and tears streamed freely down her face, the rancher gently guided her to sit on the porch steps. He brought a warm blanket from inside, draping it over her shoulders, and handed her a cup of tea. They sat together in silence for a while, the world around them quiet except for the faint rustle of leaves and the distant lowing of cows. In that moment, the woman realized something she had not dared to hope for. She was safe, truly safe, and someone cared for her deeply. Then, with a voice that trembled but carried a strange sense of courage, she said the words that had haunted her nights and guided her actions. "If death awaits me, if it ever comes, let your kiss come first." She said it softly, almost as a whisper to herself, yet her gaze met his, searching for understanding, for a promise she feared she might never have. The rancher's heart ached at the vulnerability in her eyes, at the fear and trust that collided in that single moment. He did not respond immediately with words. Instead, he reached out slowly, placing his hand over hers, feeling the warmth and fragility in her touch. He did not kiss her right away. The moment was more than that. It was a silent acknowledgement of fear, hope, and the bond that had grown between them. His eyes held hers, steady and unwavering, and in that silence an understanding passed between them. For hours they remained there on the porch, speaking quietly about the past she had fled, the present they shared, and the uncertain future that awaited them. The woman spoke of the mistakes she had made, not as excuses but as truth, and the rancher offered only compassion. He spoke little, but every word, every gesture conveyed a steady promise. She would not face the world's dangers alone again. Over the next few days, their bond grew even deeper. The woman continued to work alongside the rancher, but now there was a different energy in her movements, a sense of relief, even if tentative, and a cautious hope. She laughed more freely, spoke more openly, and allowed herself to enjoy the small moments of life on the ranch without fear always pressing at her heart. The rancher, too, changed in subtle ways. His guarded demeanor softened further, and he found himself more willing to share his own small joys, his quiet observations, and even memories of his own past losses. Yet, even as trust and affection blossomed, the shadow of her past was never far away. Occasionally, a letter arrived at the post office for her, marked with a return address she could not ignore, or a figure appeared briefly on the horizon, disappearing before she could be certain it was real. These moments reminded her that the world beyond the ranch was still unpredictable, still capable of pain and danger. But this time, she was not facing it alone. She had someone who understood, someone who could stand beside her, and someone who had proven that courage was not just strength, but steadfast presence. One evening, during a particularly beautiful sunset, the rancher and the woman sat on the porch steps again. She leaned against his shoulder, feeling the quiet steadiness of him there. "I don't know what the future holds," she whispered, her voice soft, "but I know that I don't want to face it alone." The rancher tightened his arm around her gently, his own voice calm but filled with sincerity. "You won't have to," he said. "No matter what comes, we'll face it together. You are not alone anymore." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were different, less of fear, more of relief and gratitude. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope, to imagine a future where safety, care, and even love were possible. She had carried a heavy burden for too long, but now it felt lighter, shared with someone who truly understood and accepted her. As night fell over the ranch, the stars appearing one by one in the dark sky, they remained on the porch, talking quietly, sharing dreams, fears, and fragments of their hearts. The woman finally allowed herself to express the longing for normalcy, for peace, and for a chance to live without constant fear. The rancher offered reassurance through gentle gestures, quiet words, and unwavering presence, teaching her slowly that love and trust were not weaknesses, but sources of courage. By the end of this part of the story, the past was no longer a silent, looming threat. It had been acknowledged, faced, and partially shared. The bond between the rancher and the woman had transformed into something profound. They had crossed a threshold, from cautious companionship to a deep, emotional connection that promised support, understanding, and a willingness to confront the future together. Though challenges still lay ahead, and the woman's past was not fully resolved, the foundation had been laid. Together, they had found the courage to speak the unspoken, to face fears, and to acknowledge the fragile but undeniable bond that had grown between them. Their story was no longer just about survival or routine. It was about trust, courage, and the quiet, transformative power of shared vulnerability. And so, as the ranch settled under the night sky, the woman leaned against the rancher, allowing herself to breathe fully for the first time in years. The fear remained faintly at the edges, but it was tempered by the strength of connection, the promise of protection, and the knowledge that they were no longer alone. Together, they had faced the truth, spoken words that had long been silent, and begun the journey of healing, one small, meaningful step at a time. The ranch lay quiet in the early morning light, the dew glistening on the grass and the air carrying a faint scent of earth and hay. The woman awoke slowly, the warmth of the blanket around her shoulders a comfort she had grown to rely on. The night had been calm, peaceful even, and for the first time in years, she felt a small sense of hope. Yet the awareness of what might come lingered in her mind. Her past had followed her here in small ways and whispers, and she knew it might not leave entirely. But today, at least, she was not alone. The rancher was already awake, moving quietly through his morning routine. He tended to the animals with the same steady hands and focused attention he always had, but there was a noticeable lightness in his movements. The presence of the woman at the ranch, the trust they had built, and the understanding between them had begun to transform his life as well. He no longer felt the same sharp edge of solitude. Her presence softened the loneliness he had carried for so long. As she joined him outside, carrying water for the animals, he glanced at her with a gentle smile. "Good morning," he said softly. "Good morning," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. She had decided that today she would not let fear rule her actions. Today, she would face the world with the courage she had nurtured here, in the safety of the ranch, and in the company of the man who had become her anchor. They worked side by side, moving through the morning chores with ease and quiet companionship. The rancher noticed the subtle change in her demeanor. She moved with confidence now, her hands steady, her gaze focused. There was still a shadow of caution in her eyes, but it was tempered by a growing strength, a determination to not let fear control her life. He felt pride in her resilience and a deeper bond forming between them, one that was no longer just about care, but about shared courage. Later in the morning, the woman paused near the edge of the pasture, gazing toward the distant hills. She took a deep breath as if drawing strength from the open land around her. The rancher approached, standing quietly beside her. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice calm but full of warmth. "You've faced a lot and yet you're still here." She nodded, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and lingering uncertainty. "I don't know what will happen next," she admitted, "but I know I want to face it, not run from it." The rancher placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll face it together. Whatever comes, you won't have to face it alone." The woman felt a sense of relief wash over her. For so long, she had been running, hiding from a past that seemed impossible to escape. Now, she realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. And with the rancher beside her, she felt ready to confront whatever challenges awaited. Over the next few days, they prepared for the possibility of her past returning in a more tangible form. Letters and unexpected visitors had already hinted that the outside world had not forgotten her. But instead of panic or retreat, they approached each day with careful planning and mutual support. The rancher taught her practical skills to protect herself, while she shared what she had learned about awareness and caution during her travels. Together, they formed a silent strategy, a partnership built on trust and understanding. One afternoon, a distant figure appeared on the horizon. The woman's heart skipped a beat, and she instinctively moved closer to the rancher. He followed her gaze, recognizing the tension in her posture. The figure approached cautiously, and as it drew nearer, it became clear that it was not a threat, but someone seeking information about her past. The rancher stepped slightly in front of her, a quiet but firm shield, showing that he would not allow fear to dictate their actions. The visitor spoke, asking questions carefully, testing the waters. The woman answered, her voice steady, guided by the rancher's calm presence beside her. She did not lie, but she did not reveal more than necessary. The encounter was tense, but by the time it ended, it was clear that she had faced the challenge with courage and support. For the first time, she realized that she did not have to face the world alone. With the rancher beside her, even the shadows of her past could be confronted. That evening, after the visitor had left, the woman and the rancher sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was ablaze with colors, gold, orange, and pink blending together, a quiet reminder of beauty in the world despite its dangers. She leaned against him, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. "I was so afraid for so long," she admitted softly. "Afraid that my past would catch up, that I wouldn't survive. But now I feel like I can face it, because I'm not alone." The rancher's eyes softened and he placed a hand over hers. "You've always had courage," he said. "You just needed to know someone would stand with you, and I will, every step of the way." A gentle silence fell over them, filled only by the sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cows, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the faint chirping of birds returning to their nests. It was in this quiet that the woman felt a deep sense of peace. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in a future where she could live without constant fear, where hope and love were not just fleeting moments, but something she could rely on. The days that followed were filled with simple joys and subtle celebrations. They worked together, laughed together, and shared quiet moments of understanding. The woman began to take greater control over her life, making decisions with confidence, standing tall in the face of uncertainty. The rancher continued to offer support, guidance, and patience, showing her that strength was not just about facing danger, but about being present, consistent, and kind. One evening, after completing the day's work, the woman turned to the rancher with a soft smile. "I don't know what the future holds," she said, "but I know that I want to be here with you. Whatever comes, I don't want to face it alone." The rancher took her hands in his, holding them gently. "You won't have to," he replied. "We'll face it together every step of the way. You've shown bravery beyond measure, and now you don't have to face anything without support." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. It was not the tears of fear, but of relief, gratitude, and quiet joy. She had survived so much, endured loneliness, and carried the weight of her past for years. And now she had found not only safety but a connection that gave her the strength to move forward with courage. The night settled over the ranch, calm and peaceful. The stars appeared one by one, twinkling faintly against the dark sky. They sat together on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, speaking softly about hopes, dreams, and the simple pleasures of life. It was a moment of quiet triumph, the acknowledgement that even in a world filled with uncertainty, there could be trust, love, and courage. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch became a true home, not just a place of work and survival. The woman had found a safe space where she could heal, grow, and embrace life with courage. The rancher had found companionship, trust, and a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they faced each day with patience, understanding, and the quiet bravery that comes from knowing you are not alone. Even when challenges arose, letters from the past, unexpected visitors, or reminders of old fears, they confronted them together. Their bond was strong, built on honesty, shared vulnerability, and mutual respect. They learned that courage was not about fighting alone, but about standing together, supporting each other, and moving forward with hope despite uncertainty. And so life at the ranch continued, filled with quiet victories, shared laughter, and the simple beauty of connection. The woman had faced her past, found safety and trust, and allowed herself to love and be loved. The rancher had opened his heart, offering protection, patience, and unwavering support. Together, they had created a life marked not by fear, but by courage, resilience, and the quiet power of trust. As the sun set over the fields, casting long shadows and painting the sky with warm colors, the woman leaned against the rancher, feeling the steady strength of his presence. "Thank you," she whispered softly, her voice filled with gratitude. He smiled gently, pressing a hand to hers. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You've shown courage, strength, and trust. You've earned every moment of peace and hope you feel, and I'll be here always." In that moment, the ranch was more than a home. It was a sanctuary, a place of healing, love, and quiet triumph. And for the first time in years, the woman truly believed in a future where fear did not dominate, where courage and connection could thrive, and where life, no matter what challenges remained, was worth facing.